is up? My name is Matt Workman for Cinematography Database, and today we're going to be looking at the digital Sputnik LED lighting system that is sitting right behind me in my home office. Feel pretty cool about that. And for those of you that don't watch the channel, you may not have known that these lights are being used on big feature films like Rogue One and Ghost in the Shell, but they're also now being used on more indie-sized commercials and music videos. So I thought it would be really cool to get one of these for a week and test it out and share my results with you if you are a DP or a gaffer looking to test, rent, or use one of these lights on your next production. I want to say thank you to Cower from Digital Sputnik and Mark from Off Hollywood for providing me this DS6 in the background for testing for you guys. Hope you guys are looking forward to it. Let's get right into it. For this initial test of the Digital Sputnik DS6 system, I headed over to Windy Films where Harvey and I tested and shot some basic scenes with his Red 6K camera and Zeiss Milvus lenses. I want to also say thank you to Lily and Rocky for helping out with this test, both in front of camera and behind. So right before we get into this test, I want to just preface this whole thing by saying that we're kind of in uncharted territories when it comes to digital camera sensors and LED lighting technology. For example, ISO for a digital camera doesn't really mean anything, and there's really no standardization like there used to be with the film stock. And likewise, when it comes to LEDs, every manufacturer does it differently, and ratings like CRI, TLCI, they are part of the picture, but they are not the complete picture of what makes a nice looking modern movie industry LED light. If you take the different LEDs in this room, you set them to 5500 Kelvin, and you shoot them back to back, they will be different. And so what does that mean? What does that mean for filmmakers? What does that mean for manufacturers? Are they lying? What's going on? I think all we can really do at this point, and this is the way that I look at it, is that things are evolving, and the best way of checking what is working and what is truthful about color rendition, color science, etc., is what looks good to you, okay? Because that's really all we can go on. We can't necessarily believe the ISOs, we can't believe the color ratings of the LEDs necessarily. So the way that I entered this test and the way that I kind of suggest looking at the footage from this point is forget all of the ratings, all the measurements, and just look with your eyes. Does it look good? And that's basically how I'm moving forward in the way that I think about all of this stuff at this point. It's kind of just all over the place. Maybe some people understand it better than I do, but that's the way that I've been looking at it. And that's the way that we approach this test as well. So let's start at the beginning and talk about the mechanics of the digital Sputnik lighting system. Now, the core unit of the digital Sputnik lights is this 4" by 4" by 4" cube that has about 16 LEDs in the front of it. Now, the actual beam that comes out of the DS unit, or the DS1 we'll call it, is actually pretty narrow. It's about 20 degrees. So it's kind of a spotty versus flood kind of light source, which is kind of unique for LEDs where you're used to working with panel lights that have very broad and wide light beams. In this case, the DS1, each unit is very spotty. And the way that you're going to get wider beams of light is by stacking them up into different configurations. Now, the most affordable entry-level digital Sputnik is just one of the units, and it's called a DS1, getting really popular on the indie scene in New York and LA, and all over the US in general. The next step up is a DS3, and there's a bunch of different ways to configure them. They can go all like this, they can go separately, and the one that we had for this particular test is called the DS6 back there. Now, it is a unique fixture, but it should be kind of recognizable if you've worked in the film industry for any amount of time. It looks very similar to a Mole Richardson Maxi Brute or Mini Fay, where they basically had 9 lights that were all 1K par bulbs in different columns like this that you could again focus and flood by spinning each column, and the DS6 is basically that same type of design. Moving on, there are 3 basic ways to control the digital Sputnik DS6 light that is in the background. The first way is to take a header cable and connect it to the control box. Actually, you have to connect it to the control box in all cases, but that control box has controls right on it, a little screen, a knob, and some buttons. From that screen, it is very simple to control the brightness or intensity, the saturation, or the hue or color. You can do that right there on the box. Really simple, really straightforward. But this actual DS6 that I have in the background and the one we had for the test has a Wi-Fi DS handle on it. And this allows that box to create its own wireless internet that you can log onto and control with your smartphone. Pretty amazing. The app itself is one of the best I've seen for controlling LEDs like this, and believe it or not, I've actually used a couple. It's very easy to control all of the settings, the white balance, the hue, the saturation, the intensity, and you can save the different settings. Say if you had multiple lights, you can save those as scenes and click between the different presets and change all the lighting all at once right from your phone. And the third option, if you're on a more high-end set, there is a DMX handle, and this Wi-Fi handle will also work on an ArtNet system. And the DMX and ArtNet controls are going to be for those bigger productions that have full lighting boards and they're possibly working with other LEDs that are using wireless DMX and ArtNet, so this interfaces right into that ecosystem as well. To measure the photometrics of the DS6, we set up the light unit 20 feet from a white wall, and we started to play around with the different beam angles and patterns that you could create using the DS6. Each column of 3 lights can be focused independently, but when perfectly overlapped create a very bright beam pattern that read about 360 foot candles. Each beam individually was about 160 foot candles. I'd like to put the two beams side by side so that they create a kind of rounded square light pattern, and this is a pretty focused beam compared to other LED style panel lights that are on the market. The digital Sputnik in the DS6 frame would be ideal for pushing through a frame or bouncing, given the relatively focused and intense light beam that it creates. So at first glance, looking at the DS6, you might think that it produces a fairly wide beam, but as you've seen, it actually creates a pretty narrow focused beam of light. But if you're looking for something that is much broader, much wider, it comes with different lenses where each side has a different focus range, and if you put those in front of the light, you can actually light up an extremely broad area very evenly. And we were very easily using, I believe, the 36-degree lenses in front of the DS6, able to light a 50-foot wall from 20 feet away. So after playing around and experimenting with the different patterns and light beams that we could create with the DS6, we just wanted to see how did it look on a person. So what we did is we took the DS6 and we bounced it off of the white wall at Windy Films and used that as a bounce key to light the talent. Using the DS6 as a bounce, we got about a T24 at 800 ISO, 24 frames per second at 180 degrees shutter. And we set the light to 5500 Kelvin, and we also set the red 6K camera to 5600 as well. We experimented by looking at the light at 1500 Kelvin, looking at the light at 3200 Kelvin, and then right back to 5500 Kelvin as well. Once we got the color temperature test out of the way, we proceeded to just screw around with the app and just try to make a bunch of different colors, and then most importantly, just see how did those colors look on camera. And I'll share a little bit of that with you here. Kind of a boring montage, but at least you get to see what it looked like on camera. One thing that's unique about the digital Sputnik lighting system is that the creators come from a post-production and color grading background. So instead of tuning their lights to emulate tungsten or daylight, they instead tune the light for digital camera sensors that are primarily responding to red, green, and blue light. This is illustrated best by taking a spectral reading from a digital Sputnik when it's set to 5500 Kelvin with the Sputnik C700. You can see that the light is spiking in the red, green, and blue channels specifically. This is a really unique approach to LED color science, and I think the results speak for themselves. Primarily, if you look at the whites and the skin tones, those look especially good. After we were done with our bounce test, we took out the soft box that's made by DOP Choice and installed it on the DS6. It did take a little bit of work, but once we figured it out, it was pretty straightforward. We positioned the light until we had a T4 again, and then proceeded to just dick around with the colors just to see how it looked. Nothing super special. Here's some footage of me and Harvey playing with his brand new Arri 435 camera, which is 4perf, designed to be shot with anamorphic lenses, so that's going to be fun. Here's just footage of us talking while Lily and Rocky played around with the colors. For our final test with the DS6, I really wanted to see how did this light work as a practical, and as you can kind of see in this setup, I also wanted to try it as a practical here, and you'll see this being used on music videos these days, commercials, and you'll actually see it, I think, in Ghost in the Shell. They actually use some of the units as practicals because they just look really cool on camera. We lined it up right in the middle of the camera, shined it right back towards the lens, and turned it on and scrolled around with some different colors. At a certain point, I closed the doors in the background, and a happy accident was that the backlight coming from the DS6 actually hit the wall to the left of the talent and started keying them. So that made a pretty nice looking setup. I did some rack focuses, and here's a little bit more footage from that setup. So that wraps up the testing we did with the digital Sputnik. It wasn't the most intensive scientific test in the whole world, so if you were expecting that, I'm sorry. I really just wanted to get some footage on the camera. I wanted to edit it, look at it on my system, and share that with you. I hope that you enjoyed that. If you are someone, like I said, who is looking to test, use, or rent, or buy the digital Sputnik lighting system, this is just one data point, one point of reference. It's not going to tell you everything you need to know about it, but it was the kind of test that I wanted to put together for this light. Now, for my mini personal review and first impressions of using this light, again, I haven't used it on a movie, a proper commercial, or anything where I can really test it, but my first impressions of using it is that the light looks really nice. And that's something that I've only started to build a sensitivity to recently when it comes to LED lights. For context, as long as I've been a commercial cinematographer, when I'm keying something and it needs to look really good and the colors need to look accurate, I use tungsten lights primarily. I rarely use HMIs for beauty or for product, and I rarely use fluorescence, and until recently I would never use LED if it meant proper color. The digital Sputnik and some of the other LEDs have kind of changed my mind on that, and you can kind of see that in the footage here, where you look at the skin tones and look at the whites. The whites are really important. Do the whites look really nice? I think that they do. On top of the color science, which will probably continue to evolve even within the digital Sputnik line, I will say that the app is amazing. And I can just picture it now that every single light that I'm using on set is controlled by my iPhone, and I can create multiple different lighting setups virtually in software. I guess it's not virtually, but I can create the lighting setups on my phone, share them, come up with variations, and this is what digital Sputnik talks about a lot, is that you can actually start to grade in camera. So if I'm keying someone with a digital Sputnik and the background's keyed with different lights, as I can warm up ever so slightly using the app, the key light. And that's something that was a little bit more cumbersome to do without LEDs and without an app that was as easy to use as this. You can picture putting 1/8 CTO and 1/8 CTS and 1/8 CTB. That's really labor intensive, and you kind of wanted to get that right beforehand. What I see happening in the future, and I would love to work this way if I ever hop back into doing longer form DP work or commercial work, light everything with digital Sputniks and then be able to on the fly, creatively, on a whim, even if the director or somebody or you just wants to change something really quickly, you can go from blue to orange or red to green, and it's not a big deal, it's not a huge hassle for the crew. That's something that I think is going to enable a lot of creative opportunities for future cinematographers using digital Sputnik lighting systems. I hope that you guys enjoyed this look at this. I feel like it's a little bit long, but I wanted to do it some sort of justice because it is such a cool lighting system. And again, I want to say thank you to Kaur from Digital Sputnik and Mark from Off Hollywood for letting me borrow this light. It does have to go back. Sad tears, but I'll hopefully see it on future projects. You guys get out there and plan better, shoot better.